Andrea Flores, I want you to help me put these class action suits in context, because I think we're all only going to survive the next 4 years if we can find glimmers of hope. And so sort of upon first blush, I saw these class action suits as a way for people to have some agency. But if I am understanding your analysis and Justice Sonia Sotomayor's analysis, you're essentially saying, yes, that is an option, but it is a cumbersome option that puts the onus back on an individual to pursue legal reprieve at a time when the courts have already made it more difficult for individuals to bring class action suits. Am I getting that all right? How does this actually move through the courts?
That's right. I mean, it is more cumbersome, and that has been a theme in this court where they want individuals to take on the incredibly burdensome task of defending their rights. You saw this early on when they used a wartime power to disappear over 200 men to El Salvador who are still being imprisoned there. They actually stepped in and created a more cumbersome process for them to challenge, in many ways, their own detention, which was really a new process, once again, that they were creating at the Supreme Court level. So if you look at what's happening now with these plaintiffs, well, first, these are good lawyers who know they've already been winning. There hasn't been a single lower court who has found this order to be constitutional. And that's really why a lot of legal experts believe that the administration went in on this question of a nationwide injunction, because they actually knew, as a lawyer, you don't lead with your worst argument. And their worst argument is the constitutionality of what they're trying to do. So the plain text of the Constitution is clear. Children born in the United States are American citizens, and they're looking for workarounds. And so I think the lawyers are smart to file so quickly, and to get that class certified seems very likely. And then it's really going to, advocates are going to need to make sure people feel comfortable joining the class and have education about that. So it is a new organizing challenge. It is more cumbersome. And that's why I said also, we can't panic yet. There may be a time to panic, and there may be a time for sort of greater protest organizing. I imagine that the healthcare system will really have to step in here in many of these states. But for right now, I'm confident in the class certification, and that tool is there, and the lawyers have been preparing for this scenario.
Andrea, I take your point that class certification is an option, and frankly, all of the concurring justices in the majority, they said that today. But it is cumbersome, and it does take time. And they said that they were specific about not rushing to class action without the tests being met, i.e., you just can't flip something and there wasn't a class action, make it a class action. That being said, and I throw this out to the group, and I guess, Mark, to you first. I'm not suggesting people panic, but I think the reality here is that in 30 days, if something else is not done, if you do not live in a state that was party to any of these suits, and your attorney general and your governor are Republican, because let's be very clear, now this is what we're dealing with. If you live in Texas, I think you should be concerned. And not just people who, quote unquote, look undocumented, because let's just be very clear, this is racial profiling. I mean, there might be a little light-skinned brown baby that's a little too light. And who decides who is a citizen at this point? What is the remedy? What is the mechanism?
That's why class actions are the only remaining tool in the kit at this stage. The issue, as we've discussed, is that there are booby traps all along the road to a successful class action, which the Supreme Court itself has set. And so there's going to be now this mad dash to get a class certified and to get a new injunction that applies to that class. I'm sure some of these great district court judges will do their job. They're very smart lawyers working on this right now. But what's going to happen? The district court rules, the appeals court rules, this goes right back up to the Supreme Court. And then maybe 30 days, maybe 45 days, SCOTUS is going to have to consider this issue all over again. It's going to have to deal with the class action issue, and it's going to have to get closer and closer to the merits. And this is the fundamental problem. No one can explain how Trump's order would work in practice. No one. Because the only reason that the vast majority of us have citizenship and can prove citizenship is because we were born here. When a child is born in America, the doctor doesn't demand the papers of their parents to ensure that they're a citizen or a green card holder. All they need is a birth certificate showing that they were born here. You, me, most people we know, we are citizens because of our birth. And once the government takes that away, once it introduces this wild, chaotic new system where it depends on your parents and you get punished if your parents didn't have the right papers, then everyone's citizenship is thrown into disarray. And advocates need to present that very clearly to the Supreme Court because, frankly, this conservative majority is very selective in its empathy. If it's only thinking about undocumented immigrants of color, then it might not look so hard at the 14th Amendment and it might say, I don't really see a problem. But this is going to destabilize the fundamental right of citizenship for everybody. It is going to create massive downstream consequences in a really horrible and unworkable way. And so I hope that in this next round of litigation, the Supreme Court doesn't try to duck this merits question and takes a long, hard look at what will happen if Trump tries to implement this order, because it's chaos all the way down.
Michael, I'm sorry. I can't believe that we are asking the question, is the 14th Amendment to the Constitution constitutional? That is what, it is crazy. And I am sorry, but people need to call, this is crazy. They're asking us not to believe our own eyes and our own ears. They're asking us to go against everything that we know to be true. This is insane.
Well, but this is the landscape we find ourselves on now. I mean, the reality is they have been very effective, Trump and his minions inside the government have been very effective at setting the stair steps to the various narratives that they want to get accomplished. And we had, another case today that the court ruled on, Andrea, about LGBTQ books. In which the court, based off of a Maryland case out of Montgomery County, Maryland, said, a parent can remove their child from that space, that place of learning, if they don't want their kids to learn that. Justice Sotomayor, however, in her dissent noted, casting aside longstanding precedent, the court invents a constitutional right to avoid exposure to subtle themes, contrary to the religious principles that parents wish to instill in their children. Exposing students to the message that LGBTQ people exist and that their loved ones may celebrate their marriages and life events, the majority says, is enough to trigger the most demanding form of judicial scrutiny. The result will be chaos for this nation's public schools. Joining her, of course, were Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson in their dissent as well. What's your thinking there when you look at these two decisions? How do you see this landing longer term?
It's interesting, coming from the Roberts Court, where they claim to be both conservatives and textualists, and to treat the amendments so dramatically different. How could they just allow a president? Simone, I agree. It is an extreme step the president took to attempt to essentially amend the meaning of the 14th Amendment and to win the legal procedure and ability and time to potentially do so before a court actually finds it to be unconstitutional. That is extreme. And over here, they seem to be weighing the rights of parents in the public school system far over the rights of hundreds and thousands of the babies born to immigrants. Once again, this is not just about undocumented immigrants. This is about immigrants of all types of legal status. But they're weighing different populations with a huge disparity. And so, Chief Justice Roberts wants to maintain credibility and the public trust, but I think this is really eroding a lot of the credibility of his own court and calling into question if it's so politicized, how people will respect their decisions going forward that's going to cause a great deal of chaos. And what I really, really appreciated about Justice Sotomayor is that she is always calling out the real world implications of the decisions, which are just so easy for the justices to forget, and often too easy also for Congress and the executive branch to forget. When you're designing a policy, you have to be accountable for how you're implementing it. And this Supreme Court is going far and beyond designing too many policies. And once again, if there is not a moment for the Democratic Party to get organized, step up, and really push on their Republican counterparts, then I'm really scared. And then I do think it will be time to panic, because we have two institutions picking and choosing which Americans have rights, which amendments have weight here. And I think that's how I see these two decisions. If there's a lot of inconsistency and the policy making the Supreme Court is doing by claiming they're making procedural decisions is really shocking. And I don't want people to forget that they have illegalized, they have taken away legal status at the stroke of a pen through procedure now for hundreds and thousands of people. So we have to watch them just as closely as we're watching the executive branch. And once again, if Democrats really don't step up here and help people understand how these two institutions are failing them, I worry about what will happen at that point.